Welcome to Peony Bud painting practice. And this practice is about understanding volumes. Each subject has volume to make it look realistic on a flat surface. Removing excess amount of graphite off the paper with an elastic eraser. I'm painting in my sketchbook. Let's mix watercolors using sap green. Adding lemon yellow to the first mix, sap green with lemon yellow. Second mix, sap green, a little bit of ultramarine blue, more sap green, transparent yellow, alizarin crimson, little touch of alizarin crimson, any red pigment. It should be really small amount. Perylene green with transparent yellow. Separately, I have alizarin crimson, because there are some spots on this peony bud that are quite red. Painting with round synthetic brush, water layer. Be sure that your water is clean after mixing watercolors. And starting from warmer green mix, adding cooler, constantly checking reference. And I'm starting from the darker area on this peony bud. And the thing here is to see those tonal values. Tonal values are reflected light area, shadow area, halftones, and light area. In order to make something look voluminous, realistic, 3D, name it as you like, we need to show these tonal values. It's not about color, it's not about texture, it's about tonal values to make something look realistic on a flat surface like paper. We can paint black and white and we can still make it look realistic because it's not about color, it's not about form, it's not about texture, it's about tonal values. That is helping our eye understand that something is realistic in front of us. And for our eyes, it doesn't matter it is on a paper or it is in real subject in front of us. We see tonal values. First layer is really transparent. Now with finer tip brush, I'm very transparently pointing the area where the petal veins are. As we see in the reference, there are tiny petal veins visible on the surface of this peony bud. Again, everything is done transparently. I'm building layers gradually. Even this is quite a rough painting. I will not go into really detailing and super accurate painting. I'm here more concentrating on seeing those values, and I'm painting in the sketchbook. Paper is 200 GSM. So the paper is quite thin compared to my usual 640 GSM, but still I can layer. It's just a matter how much water or how lesser amount of water, and I wait between layers to dry it. I can't add too many layers. Maybe 640 is allowing a little bit more layers to apply in one sitting, but the thinner the paper, the lesser amount of layers you can apply. It's one layer, then I move to some other area, then I apply another layer. I'm not physically sitting and waiting for layer to dry and then paint. I just skip different areas on my painting surface so I don't spend extra time just sitting and waiting. That's why maybe I'm sometimes skipping from one area to another, and from the side it maybe looks chaotic, but it's about painting all the time, not wasting time for drying time of the paper, but instead of waiting, I'm painting some other area. Now moving to the next area on the peony bud, applying watercolors, and as you can see, I'm applying transparently. It's important here to leave light area. It's always about keeping more light than it appears in a reference. Reference has a small area of light. If we take a look in the first glimpse that we see, oh, there's just a little small area, but it's important to leave it much wider. Here with the stippling method, I'm applying watercolors to wet surface, picking alizarin crimson. It can be any red pigment you have, Winsor red, cadmium red, and again transparently applying more to the areas there that I see where is the red color on this peony bud. Painting with finer tip brush. Everything is done transparently and accurately. Even this is not super precise and super detailed painting. I'm still quite concentrating on the painting process. I want to be accurate. Moving to the next section on this peony bud, which is the lightest part. And now I'm leaving lighter area much wider. I will leave all this section that is light unpainted, and with layers I will make it smaller and closer to the reference. But it's all done gradually, and so I don't have any crisp lines where the halftones end and the light starts. Smaller sections that we see on this peony bud, applying with finer tip brush. Applying more alizarin crimson spots. My guide is the reference, everything is there, so I'm slowly examining, observing what I see in the reference, constantly checking. I have reference open right beside my painting area. You can open it right beside tutorial and zoom in closer the area that we are working on, so you also notice the things that I'm doing. For example, this little leaf has shadow area on the top, then there's light area in the middle, and again darker shadow area at the bottom part where it connects with peony bud. So these little things we need to consider, we need to show them in our painting in order to make it look realistic. If I would paint all this little leaf completely dark, then it would look lifeless and quite flat. But now it has movement just because we have these tonal values of shadow and light. As the first area that I painted is dry, I can move and paint another layer using watercolors that we pre-mixed, mostly sap green, transparent yellow, sap green, ultramarine blue, Let's have a closer look of how I paint and how I approach this painting process. Maybe it looks at first that it is something simple, but as we move forward and observe the reference, there are so many details, so many tonal values to consider in order to make it look realistic and round. With the finer tip brush, making edge of petal more crisper, more precise, working slowly and accurately. If you need to pause, you can pause this video any moment, really observe reference and apply things that I'm doing right now. Applying more watercolors to this area, which is the darkest one. Here I noticed that in this area Peony Bud is too dark and missing one light area. So with the clean, slightly moist brush I apply water layer and with paper towel lift out watercolors. And as you can see, watercolors are lifted easily as long as you are painting transparently and not too saturated watercolor mixes. Then you can manipulate with watercolors quite a lot, but if you will use saturated dark watercolor mixes, then it will be hard to do something to make it lighter, even add more layers. When you have too dark and saturated, then the painting process finishes too fast and you can't add this volume to your work. Applying watercolors to leaves that are attached to this peony bud. In this tutorial I will cover only the peony bud. You can practice leaf painting on your own, but you can also, for example, make these leaves in graphite. If you are painting in sketchbook, it will be interesting that the peony bud is done with watercolors and leaves are done with the graphite pencils. Experiment, try something new. Make this learning process interesting and enjoyable. adding more layers, and my brush strokes are uneven to create this texture that we see on this peony bud, using sap green, transparent yellow, and a little touch of alizarin crimson. Again, I'm not painting smoothly because in the reference I can clearly see that the surface of this peony bud has roughly and with little spots. There's not evenness in this peony. That's why my brush strokes are in different directions, with the stippling, with little brush strokes. Don't make it too smooth, but still leave light, and paint transparently with layers. Adding fine brush strokes where the veins are, behind the vein, behind the other vein. Smooth the applied layer. And now fine line applying in front of veins, because veins have shadow on both sides. One part, which is on the right, is more darker, but the other part of the vein is slightly lighter, but still there is this a little bit darkness on both sides to make this vein look that it is popping out of the surface of this peony bud. Removing a little bit if you instantly notice that you apply something too much, you can instantly also remove with paper towel that amount of watercolors or water. Applying clean sap green to color palette and applying to peony bud to make it more vividly green, more yellowish green. Sap green is more yellowish green rather than bluish green, and I see that in this part where the sun is shining there is much warmer area. As this peony bud reference was taken in direct sunlight and during the daytime, then the lighter parts here are warm because sun is yellow and it is creating warm light area, but the shadow parts are cool. I have very small amount of references and tutorials when light area is warm and shadow area is cool. Most of my reference and tutorials are when the light area is cool. This little change is a nice practice for you and for me as well to paint differently when the light is warm but the shadow is cool. With finer tip brush, applying shadow where the petal is attached to peony bud, and there is this beautiful cast shadow area which will help us make it more realistic. I really like cast shadow areas. They are really changing the whole painting when I add them. So I always try to look for cast shadow areas when I choose references, because that is the part which is really helping us making something look more realistic, something look popping out from the paper surface. Painting further, applying layers and slowly building richness, saturation of this peony bud. It's becoming more and more roundish. Just because I'm applying layers, I'm constantly checking reference. Here on the upper part of this peony bud also are slightly visible petal veins, and with a finer tip brush, super light amount of watercolors, I'm applying that area behind vein, slightly darker, and in front of the vein. Here I'm painting a little tip of the petal which is sticking out of the surface, and notice in a reference that the area around this tip is slightly darker, and the very tip is with alizarin crimson or any other red pigment that you have. Now I'm applying watercolor layers around that little tip. That tip is so tiny, so be careful, don't lose it. It's a nice touch to leave it. Applying transparent layers, first layers to leaves, and here I'm taking lemon yellow, clean lemon yellow, because in the reference you can clearly see that this leaf has very bright area, further area, and I'm applying there lemon yellow, and it's making this piece like it looks in the reference. Leaves are starting also with transparent layers, carefully adding watercolors, waiting between layers for them to dry, and constantly checking reference. All information that I need is there. We just need to look, carefully study the reference, think what we see, think beyond those details, beyond those beautiful finishing parts. We need to look deeper into the reference, because we are with watercolors, we are painting from the base and moving to the top where are the details. But when we're choosing reference, first what we see are details, but in watercolor painting, details are almost the last that are painted. That's like cherry on top of the cake, but we need to start with the crust, which is completely down below. adding fine and slightly darker lines here where the petals and leaf is connecting together to separate them, adding cast shadow area. Now as I'm reaching the finishing part to this peony bud, I will start to add more details, some little things that I can see, adding slightly more contrast. Applying transparent layer to the next leaf with round synthetic brush. Surface is slightly moist, not too much water. Looking at reference, and this leaf is curved away from us. Upper part is darker. It is attached to the stem. That part which is bright green is a stem. It's not a continuing part of the leaf, it's a stem. Now with the clean and dry brush, finer tip brush, I'm wiping out the pigment where the veins are. I want to have them light, and while the surface is still moist, I can lift out watercolor layer very easily, just because I'm painting transparently and the layer is still a little bit moist. Getting back to peony bud, applying less details, building more contrast where it is necessary with a finer tip brush. Be careful with the outer edges, don't go over the edges. We want to have clean and neat surrounding area of this peony bud. Last brush strokes, final touches to make this peony bud more realistic, more vividly. Here I'm going over again with transparent layer over the light edge of the right petal that is on the peony bud, because it is not so light as it was, but it is slightly lighter, but still that part is in the shadow, so I need to make it slightly darker than the one it's completely exposed to the light. Thank you for watching. Hope you learned something new from this tutorial and also gave it a try. See you in my next tutorials. Bye bye.